We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
to each and every one of you
for helping our great nation
find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV,
on radio
and online.
We're proud to be
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
On Mark Dolan tonight, in my big opinion monologue. After its 2.5-year obsession with COVID, it's time for the NHS to once again focus on public health and do it without spending billions more of taxpayers' cash. And is it too much to ask for a GP's appointment this side of Christmas? Joe Biden has another senior moment, calling out to a woman he thought was in the crowd, who in fact died in August. We'll talk about his car crash presidency with the Queen of US political royal is reporting Kinsey Schofield. And in my take at 10, we should follow Denmark in having a similar slimmed down monarchy. King Charles, Queen Camilla, no problem. William and Kate and Anne, they're all heroes, but let the rest pay their way. Plus my all-star panel and tomorrow's papers at 10:30. I promise you, we've got a special one tonight. Get the kettle on, and I'll see you on the other side of Tatiana Sanchez.
Thank you very much, Mark. This is the latest from the GB Newsroom. Merseyside police have charged a 34-year-old man with the murder of Olivia Pratt-Corbell. Thomas Cashman is accused of killing the 9-year-old who was shot in her home in Liverpool last month. A second man, 40-year-old Paul Russell, has been charged with assisting an offender. Cashman has also been charged with the attempted murder of Olivia's mother and convicted burglar Joseph Nee, who was chased into the property. They'll appear at Liverpool Magistrates Court on Monday.
The investigation team, with support from officers and staff from across the UK, have worked relentlessly since the murder on the 22nd of August. It has been a complex inquiry which has been supported throughout by Olivia's mum and dad and the wider Merseyside community.
The Prime Minister has arrived in Birmingham for the annual Conservative Party conference, which begins tomorrow. There's mounting pressure on the government after the pound dropped to a record low following the Chancellor's £45 billion package of unfunded tax cuts last week. The Chancellor defended his mini-budget, saying the government had to do something different to spark the economy. The comments come after the Prime Minister admitted the government's strategy has caused disruption and warned the country faces a difficult winter. Thousands of activists have gathered across the UK in protest against the rising cost of living. It comes as an energy price cap rise comes into effect for millions of households. The new price cap is now in place, with a typical household expected to spend around £2,500 a year. That's up from £1,971. People are being advised to take a photograph of their meter readings amid record high energy prices. Rail travellers have experienced disruption across the UK as train drivers staged a 24-hour strike. Members of the ASLEF, RMT and TSSA unions walked out in a long-running dispute over pay, jobs and conditions. The strikes caused major disruption, leaving only 11% of trains running. RMT Union Secretary-General Mick Lynch says they'll strike until they reach an agreement.
There will be more action like this because people in Britain are being made deliberately poorer by this government every day of the week, and we've got to rebalance that. This is part of that campaign. We're going to get a deal for our members through negotiation, but supported by strike action.
Police say they've not yet found human remains as their search for Moors murder's victim, Keith Bennett, continues. The 12-year-old was one of 5 victims of Ian Brady and Myra Hindley, with 3 of them later found buried on Saddleworth Moor. They were discovered in the Peak District by an author researching the 12-year-old's murder. Brady and Hindley murdered 5 children in the mid-1960s, with 3 of the victims found. Ukraine's President Zelensky says fighting continues in the east of the country. But earlier, Russia said its troops abandoned the key town of Lyman to avoid being trapped. Well, a video posted online by the Ukrainian president's chief of staff shows soldiers climbing onto a vehicle and waving the national flag on the outskirts of the town. It comes as Russia has vetoed a United Nations resolution condemning Moscow's illegal annexation of 4 areas of Ukraine. TV, online and DAB+ radio. This is GB News. Now it's back to Mark Dolan tonight.
Many thanks to Tatiana Sanchez, who returns in an hour's time. Welcome to Mark Dolan Tonight. Another action-packed show on the way, and yet another gaffe for Joe Biden, arguably the most powerful man in the world. Take a look at this.
And so many of you know so much about this as well, and you're committed. And I want to thank all of you here for including bipartisan elected officials like Representative Governor, Senator Braun, Senator Booker, Representative Jackie. Are you here? Where's Jackie? I didn't think she was going to be here.
Where's Jackie? She was killed in a car crash in August. We'll talk about his own car crash presidency with the queen of US political reporting, Kinsey Schofield. With me all night, my all-star panel reacting to the big stories of the day and tomorrow's papers. Adventurer, coach and social commentator Adrian Hayes. Legendary broadcaster David Hamilton. And ethnographer and academic Lisa McKenzie. They'll be joining me to discuss the big issues of the day, including, is university still worth the money? And after this hero rugby tackled a suspected criminal in the street. Look at that heroism. Put him in the England team. Is it foolish to fight back against criminals, or is it a civic duty? I want to hear from you throughout the show, mark at gbnews.uk. And this show has a golden rule. We don't do boring. Not on my watch. I just won't have it. So for the next 2 hours, big debates, big guests, and always big opinions. We've got the most amazing question for the big question. Is it acceptable to dump your partner if they start putting on weight? Well, weight is the topic of my big opinion monologue. Let's go. This will have you spitting out your dinner. The Telegraph report that food labels with information such as calories in this cake require 90 minutes of walking to burn off were far more likely to be understood compared to a traffic light system. This according to a study by Loughborough University, which surveyed more than 2,600 adults who were told, for example, that a chocolate wafer biscuit with 209 calories would cost 21 minutes of running, or twice as long for anyone taking a stroll. Now, I'm against the nanny state. We've had a few years now of the government telling us what to do, so I think it's time to let people live their lives. And it's a fundamental human right to be able to eat yourself and drink yourself into an early grave if you so wish. But I think this research is potentially useful in the much-needed battle against obesity. Because it's based on how I've always said we should tackle this. Information, not instruction. There's very little evidence that scrapping 2-for-1s on unhealthy food in the supermarket makes a blind bit of difference. Often diet drinks are just as unhealthy in a different way. And in terms of scrapping meal deals, are we really going to make food deliberately more expensive during a cost of living crisis when queues for food banks get longer by the day? It's abundantly clear that junk food is the tobacco of the modern era. In the 1950s, 60s, 70s and 80s, smoking grew ever more popular, and it became clear that in spite of the massive marketing behind tobacco, it was slowly killing us and burdening our health systems. A concerted effort to encourage people off the fags was highly successful. Not by banning cigarettes, people were given information, not instruction. And the rising cost of tobacco meant that you could continue to puff away, but it was going to cost you. This will have to happen with the food industry, who have adopted very similar policies to the tobacco giants. For example, nonsense, highly compromised so-called studies showing their food is super healthy, like cereal companies paying for research that miraculously confirms you need your cornflakes in the morning. Fags were at one point marketed in America as good for chest complaints, and they had adverts on American TV saying, "Your doctor recommends Camel cigarettes." Amazing! But there are parallels now with companies like McDonald's, spending millions linking themselves to Premier League football and the Olympics in order to create the illusion that their food, I use the term loosely, is somehow part of a healthy lifestyle. Because their brands sit there in the context of sport. Except I don't think Cristiano Ronaldo would have achieved that famous six-pack on a diet of Happy Meals. The painful truth is that being fat has become normalised across the Western world. Look at this cover of the US magazine Sports Illustrated, which used to be adorned by lean, athletic models. Now, this lady is very, very beautiful, but she's overweight, hardly a role model. The messaging here is disastrous. Meanwhile, this is what a Calvin Klein model looks like in 2022. Again, she's a very beautiful lady, but rocking that much of a BMI is grounds for a visit to the doctor, not the photographic studio. Here's what the typically astute commentator Dominique Samuels had to say on the matter just a few months ago. She said, "Why do we need the morbidly obese to speak their truth in their Calvins? Out of all of the black plus-size models that exist, you had to pick the one that's 5 minutes from diabetes to promote unhealthy living. Calvin Klein," says Dominique, "you should be ashamed." So how do we change things? The state, of course, must apply pressure on these fast food giants to improve their recipes and to make them healthier. These multi-billion-dollar corporations could potentially pay more tax as their products are providing such a burden on our health service. The public should be armed with more information about the rubbish they're eating so they can make an informed choice. Information, not instruction. And I say, start them when they're young. Schools should be teaching what used to be called home economics. All too often, kids come out of school barely able to put a chicken tikka masala in the microwave. Teach them how to boil an egg, steam some broccoli, fry a steak, or roast a chicken. Teach kids about real food. Because in the 60s, the 70s and the 80s, we did not have obesity. Why? Because we didn't snack. It was 3 square meals a day, real food, meat and 2 veg. And treats like ice cream or chocolate bars were a weekly, not a daily event. Young people now who are at the forefront of exploding obesity rates have upped the ante. They're eating crap by the hour, by the minute. Made worse, of course, by lockdowns as people stayed home and dialed Deliveroo to have this toxic slurry delivered straight to their door. We've got to tackle this crisis because things are getting worse. COVID was arguably a disease of obesity. If you had a high BMI, and that's what they call metabolic syndrome, type 2 diabetes, high blood pressure and a big waistline, you were disproportionately at risk from the virus. It's not going too far to say that if there had been no obesity, there was no pandemic. The statistics around the world, in terms of the obese people in ICU, 80% in America, for example, speaks for itself. Which is why I'm afraid that the NHS asking for more money falls on deaf ears. For almost 3 years now, the NHS became the national COVID service, obsessed with trying to stop a seasonal respiratory virus. And with that, they stopped treating other illnesses, presided over a waiting list of potentially 12 million people, and now we're paying the health price. You try getting a GP appointment this side of Christmas. Good luck with that. Your leg could be hanging off, and even then, they'd still insist on having a Zoom appointment. Obesity is the real pandemic. It's been tearing through our population for 30 years, and it's getting worse. And it's the pandemic that the government, the media, and our health service have been ignoring. A record amount is going into the NHS, and yet we're sicker than ever. And the elephant in the room is the fact that we're overweight. Linked to depression and joint problems, 30-year-olds are now going in for knee replacements, and you know how expensive they are. Obesity is also linked to high blood pressure, cancer, kidney disease, eye problems, chest issues. You name it, every major ailment you can think of is linked to obesity, a so-called illness which is entirely preventable and man-made. All the NHS want to do is manage the symptoms, expensively treating the millions in this country with type 2 diabetes, pumping people with heart problems full of statins, and spending billions a year on heart operations and other procedures, none of which would be necessary if we simply ate the way we did in the 60s, the 70s, and the 80s. And we still had our treats. But look at any photograph of the public from that era, any pictures from the old days. A handful of fat people, the majority slim as they come. Take a snapshot of the British public now, and the opposite's the case. It's the thin ones who stand out. Now, I was getting quite the belly in 2018, and I followed the low-carb principles of the brilliant NHS GP, Dr. David Unwin. This is a man who gets his patients off processed carbohydrates, sugar, bread, pasta, rice, potatoes and beer. I dropped 3 stone thanks to his advice, and he has reversed the diabetes of scores of his patients. Why isn't the whole of the NHS doing what Dr. David Unwin does? These lifestyle-related illnesses are now such a cost to the NHS, they threaten, in time, to bankrupt the whole thing because of the astonishing cost of managing these chronic preventable diseases. Operations, medical devices, and of course medication are a massive industry that you and me are needlessly paying for, lining the pockets of big pharma. It doesn't have to be this way. Mark my words, obesity and our bulging waistline is killing us. And if we continue to ignore it, it will kill the country too. It's enough to make you sick. What's your view? How do we tackle the obesity crisis without bringing in the nanny state? Mark at gbnews.uk. I'll get to your emails shortly, but reacting to my big opinion monologue and all of the big stories of the day are ethnographer and academic Dr. Lisa Mackenzie, adventurer, coach and social commentator Adrian Hayes, and broadcaster Diddy David Hamilton. Adrian, let me start with you. Do you think that obesity could potentially destroy the NHS?
Well, I think the National Health Service should really be called the National Sickness Service. You said it. I mean, just to point one thing out, when you said about the COVID, obesity was one of the main factors. It was very, very early on, it became one of the things. It's one of these things that you started looking around and you saw sort of people. You saw, well, an overweight person, and you realise it's actually called the Baader-Meinhof syndrome. You see a pink car once, and you see it everywhere. And I've lived in about 8 countries and travelled over 100, and honestly, I can say the UK and the USA are the most overweight countries in the world. What do we do about it, though? I think what I don't like is government telling us what to do and instructing. I think these instructions on labels will do nothing. If you tax more foods, it just goes in the bottomless pit that is the government tax revenues. What I think we need, and you said it, is education. You know, we need to start at schools. Is it beyond schools' education curriculums to have nutrition, health and fitness once a week, or home economics, as you said? Doctors they used to do 1 week's nutrition in their whole 7 years of study. So I think it's 2 weeks now. The NHS website has still got this outdated approach to nutrition. And, I mean, you're talking to 3 panellists whose bodies are temples, of course. But mine's a ruined one.
You speak for yourself.
But well booked on the basis of your BMI, I've got to say.
I mean, BMI, you know, I've been doing the keto diet for a few years, and yet the whole thing out there talks about low fat, low fat, low fat. It's bonkers. You know, it's about, as you said, the refined carbohydrates, sugars, and all the junk food that we need to get rid of. But as I said, it's an education thing which we need to be putting more in, as opposed to control and nanny state instruction.
Lisa McKenzie, I've got kids at school, and they have something called food tech, and that's fine, but they spend half their time making muffins and cookies. We need to get back to real food, don't we?
Well, let me just unpick some of the stuff that we've looked at tonight. So the Calvin Klein model, I thought that was quite unfair, actually. I don't know if you remember, I know you will remember, Mark, the early 90s Calvin Klein models that was heroin chic. And, you know, being strung out on heroin and 5 stone really was not a healthy look. So I think it was a bit unfair for them to attack the sort of Calvin Klein model. Where I agree with you is the big industry, big pharma, and, you know, there is money to be made out of people overeating. There's money everywhere to be made. And yes, we need probably better education at school, but we also need to recognise that this has really happened over the last 30 years. And I'm going to say it, as capitalism is sort of king, people's mental health and physical health, the human beings' mental and physical health are declining, and you know that there is a connection to that. So we have to think about that. Like you said, the way that McDonald's, Burger King, all the big sort of food giants, where they're allowed to advertise. I mean, at the Olympics, and apparently it's fine.
Well, absolutely. And Lisa, don't censor yourself. You're right to call out capitalism, because at the heart of my big opinion tonight is that it's the big food industry that are killing us.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And it's anything that comes in a box, isn't it, Lisa? Anything with more than 5 ingredients, you know, tons of dodgy vegetable oils and God knows, preservatives.
Palm oil, which is actually, you know, it's the growing of palm oil is actually killing the Amazon rainforest. So, you know, there is so much that is wrong. And then there are the small things that are wrong, you know, the small things but mean a lot to people. For example, schools selling off playing fields. You know, the lack of good... I mean, I hated sport at school in the 80s. You know, in the 80s, it was forced upon you. But there was something about making you do something 2 or 3 times a week.
I agree. David, what's your thoughts on this? You are a man of an excellent vintage, so you'll have seen the changing national waistline, and it's going in the wrong direction, isn't it?
Yeah, I have to say, in my long lifetime, I've never seen so many obese people. I'm absolutely shocked by it. And one of the things that amazes me is a lot of them seem to be so proud of it. They almost sort of, you know, wear it as a badge. You know, I'm fat and I love it. And, you know, what I don't understand is if there's so much poverty, how can people be spending so much money on food? You know, I mean, I remember, you know, the years after the war, when a lot of people were very poor. And if you look back to that particular time, people were quite skinny. You know, they were, if anything, they looked a bit underfed. Yeah. But I think it is education, and I think people need to be told. And you've said a lot of it earlier. You know, all the things that are so bad about being overweight, and just putting it from their point of view, there's nothing to be proud of. Actually, you need to be ashamed of it, really, and extremely worried if that's the condition that you're in.
Lisa, I'm going to come back to you for just this one, if you don't mind, because you mentioned the pharmaceutical industry, Lisa. I feel that we're trapped between a rock and a hard place, which is the food industry, which is making us fat and ill, and the pharmaceutical industry, which has the solution, which is diabetes drugs, statins and medical devices.
Yeah, and also the beauty industry that makes billions out of, you know, sort of telling well, actually men and women now that their bodies are not good enough, and this product is going to help you get the body. So, you know, there is a whole network of industry that is making, you know, they're making billions and billions every single day out of, I don't know, I suppose, human fallibilities.
Well, yes, I mean, I do think that the big food industry and pharma, they work symbiotically. They feed each other quite literally. Adrian, final thought on this. You mentioned your keto diet. I mentioned Dr. David Unwin in my big opinion. This is a humble NHS GP who decided for himself, actually, he was putting on weight, he was tired all the time. He's like, OK, I'll get my blood sugar down by getting rid of carbohydrates, and biscuits and, you know, anything with wheat in it, pasta, bread, potatoes, sugar, all of that. And it's worked. Why isn't the NHS embracing this approach?
Because the research or the guidelines go back to, at least I said, big food corporations' infiltration of the FDA back in the 70s.
Because they sell all that crap, don't they?
Yeah.
Yeah, and you said big food, big tech, big pharma. I'm not sure which is worse. So we're still...
And the beauty, don't forget the beauty industry as well. I think they need to be able to account.
But we still are languishing around, and there's so many people. If you ask 1,000 people on the streets, most people will still be looking for low fat, low fat. You know, I eat nuts, I eat cheese, I eat milk, I eat meat, I eat fish, everything. A lot of carbs, but it's good vegetables. But I avoid the junk food, and yes, as you said, the bread, the pastas, the rice, and those sort of things. And actually, another person who, Tom Watson, the former leader of Deputy Leader of the Labour Party, he wrote a book, how he reverses type 2 diabetes by going on the keto diet. This is the message we need to be sending to all school children, to parents, NHS, doctors, everything. This is the one that not only makes you slimmer, but it's actually better for your all-round health as well.
Well, definitely. I just, you know, I don't own shares in any of these sort of websites or indeed organisations that encourage the low-carb lifestyle. If you're thinking of, you know, losing weight, go and see your GP. That's your first port of call. But my mum's got an amazing GP. Her blood sugars were a little too high, pre-diabetic, and they gave her a copy of Dr. Michael Mosley's book, which is The Fast 800, which is effectively another form of low carb. It's keeping your blood sugar low. Intermittent fasting, you know, you skip breakfast. But consult your GP. Dietdoctor.com is another good website that I've used in the past. But as I say, we wish you luck. There's no fat shaming here. I just love this country and I want everyone to be well, especially our kids. Lots more to come. Next, in the big question, is it wrong to dump your partner if they put on weight? Also, later in the show, take a look at tonight's stories. Is university still worth the money? Are movies and TV shows about serial killers unethical? Is it foolish to fight back against criminals? And are Brits abroad a national embarrassment? All of that to come, plus the papers at 10:30. But next up, what do you think? Would you be willing to dump your partner if they piled on the pounds? See you in 2.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
For helping our great nation.
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland. On TV.
on radio,
And online.
we're proud to be
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. Over a drink, we have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
What's the best part of my show? It's when you get in touch. The emails are coming in thick and fast. A big reaction to my big opinion monologue. This from Peter. For once, Mark, I agree emphatically and entirely with your big opinion tonight. However, several observations on why people were less obese in the past. Kids played outside rather than sitting around gathering as they do today. Also, the family food budget was once a third of the weekly disposable income. Today, food is much more plentiful and cheaper and only constitutes 10% of weekly disposable income. Cheap food, that's an interesting point you make, Peter. Most people in the past did not have sedentary occupations. Many literally laboured for a living. And also, a couple of people have said this, lots of people smoked in the 60s and 70s, and they were thinner. Not that I'd recommend going back on the fags, but it might be a point. Angela says, Mark, instead of showing cooking shows on TV, where they use too many oils and sauces, let's see basic cooking with reasonably priced ingredients. Well, I'm really glad you mentioned that, Angela, because I'm a fan of Bake Off as a TV show. But essentially, every week it's cakes, 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 isn't it? You do wonder why we're getting so porky. Ray says, hi, Mark, the simple way to deal with the obesity problem is for every obese person to self-identify as thin. Isn't that how it works these days? Great show. Ray, I love your email. Loved all the emails. Keep them coming in. It's absolutely the highlight of my day. Absolutely. It's time now for the big question in which we tackle a major news story of the day. A man has come in for heavy criticism on social media for making a comment about his partner's weight on a hit reality TV show. It happened on a programme called Married at First Sight, where strangers tie the knot moments after meeting one another. Just beforehand, he said, I do. He suggested that he would normally go for somebody more petite. He said to her, normally, I would choose to marry someone more petite. And it's not the only time the issue has been thrown up on the programme. Take a look at this.
She was talking about, oh, she's going to go to the gym with Matt. I said, well, don't be doing the same exercises as them. I'd never personally want a girl that's got huge, like, horse legs. That's what I said. And it's the same as if my girlfriend put on a huge amount of weight. If it wasn't for medical reasons or something like that, I wouldn't want to be with her either.
No. I mean, it's a hell of a chat-up line, isn't it? You know, I normally date someone more petite than you. Bearing in mind that this couple are now married and he'd already voiced his concerns about his partner's appearance, will it have an effect on their relationship going forward? Is it ever acceptable to critique your partner's weight? Is it acceptable to dump them if they become a porker? Well, let's debate this now with Married at First Sight coach Mel Schilling. Great to see you. Mel, welcome to the programme.
Hello, Mark. Thanks for having me.
That was a pretty spicy moment for the show. Was the lady involved offended?
Yes, she was. She was. And who wouldn't be? I mean, it's insulting. It's essentially it's a social aggression, and this whole idea of fat shaming, you know, more broadly, is something that has become a bit of a national pastime. I mean, I've been listening to your show. I've been hearing all of these points about, you know, the BMI going up year on year, and obesity is a problem, and I get it. It absolutely is. It's an epidemic, and I see that in children as well. But there's a misconception that fat shaming is going to change behaviour. There's been some research done on people who actually partake in this sport called fat shaming, and they believe that by saying something hurtful or shameful to a person who's overweight, it's going to motivate them to go to the gym or to start eating lean. But the opposite is actually true. And what the research shows is that it does some real psychological damage. It increases things like anxiety, depression, and definitely plummeting self-esteem. And all of these things actually reduce motivation. So it actually makes it worse.
So how do we get the message across? Because we don't want to normalise obesity, do we? Just as we didn't normalise lung cancer for smokers.
Right. And that's not the answer either, of course. You know, we want to be about healthy people on the physical level, but of course we want strong well-being and psychological health as well. So when we come back to that intimate relationship and the idea of, you know, is it helpful, if you like, to shame your partner if they're gaining weight? Well, no, it's not. And what would be a better approach would be to actually build them up. So, you know, a lot of the research tells us that people who engage in unhealthy eating or have an unhealthy relationship with food, have unhelpful thinking about food, there's a strong link between this and self-esteem. So, you know, in those intimate relationships, if we can be doing everything we can to build the esteem of our partner, to show empathy for how they're feeling, to lift them up, to give them, you know, other things to focus on, then we're more likely to give them the psychological platform they need to engage in more healthy eating.
Indeed. Blimey, did you see those pictures of fish and chips there? They looked absolutely delicious, didn't they? Sebastian, back to me. Come on, this is Telly Love. There you go. Look, the thing is, we've got to reflect on this, haven't we? Because we obviously want people not to be abused. Fat shaming is completely unacceptable. But in terms of the relationship, is there not an unspoken compact, a deal between a couple when they get married that you're going to kind of do basic upkeep? And therefore, does one partner have grounds to get out of that relationship if the other partner does gain massive amounts of weight?
Have you ever met a woman who's had a baby?
Two. When I say two, I've met one that's had two, absolutely.
Bodies change, people change, men gain weight too. You know, one of the joys of being in a long-term relationship is you get to go through the ebbs and flows of life with that person. And often that means that bodies change, hairlines change, you know. This is part of accepting a partner for who they are and loving them anyway.
Mel, may I ask you a personal question?
Go ahead.
Are you married or are you in a long-term relationship?
I'm married, yeah.
Okay, and if your partner, I don't know, gained about 5 stone, you know, they're just on the Deliveroo the whole time, they get through a 6-pack of beer every night, how would you tackle that? And do you think you would wind up in the divorce courts?
No, and look, the two of us, we've been together for nearly 12 years and we've both been through, you know, the ups and downs of our weights. I mean, I've had a child and, you know, been through IVF, and so all of that has changed my body shape. He's gone through stages where he developed a gorgeous little beer belly. You know, the poor thing's Northern Irish, but he was living in Australia for a while, so, you know, he made like the natives. And I absolutely loved that. You know, that was a phase of life that we were in together, and, you know, we talked about it. It certainly wasn't something that was brushed under the covers. It was, you know, we used humour and had a joke about it. And then, you know, we started motivating each other, you know, to get into the gym and to eat healthily, you know. So it was, I think, you know, it was very much about, okay, what can we do about this problem? Let's work together toward a solution, as opposed to, you know, you got a bit of a paunch and you're no longer sexy.
Well, I think that's very wise. I've got to say that when my wife was pregnant, I had a sympathy belly as well, because that's how caring and empathetic I am, Mel. Let's bring in my brilliant panellist, if I may, Mel, Dr. Lisa McKenzie, who's an ethnographer and an academic. Lisa, what do you think about this? Is there an unspoken deal when you get married that you're going to keep yourself in ship shape?
I think there is. I do actually think there is. I think if you're in any sort of relationship, you want each other, you know, you want to be attractive to each other. So I think most people in relationships, they're fully aware of, you know, that sort of unspoken deal. But what worries me with this is conflating health with attractiveness. And I think that's what we're doing here. We're mixing the two up. Being healthy is not the same as what is fashionable or attractive today. You know, things change. Women, like you said, women's bodies change. And I think what really worries me about this, it's always the onus is on the woman. You know, the woman it's about her body shape, what is happening to her. And I think from the clip that you showed from Married at First Sight, it was, again, another man saying, you know, I expect a woman to be like this or look like this. And therefore, that's about attractiveness and fashion. It's not about being healthy, is it?
I think it's a really important distinction, and you could be stick thin and very unhealthy if you don't get proper nutrition, as we mentioned with those 80s and 90s models, Lisa.
Yeah.
Let's bring the boys in, shall we? Let's give the lads a right to reply. SAS hero Adrian Hayes and radio and TV legend David Hamilton. So, David, what do you think? You've been married to Mrs. Hamilton for a long, long time. I've got no doubt she's a stunning lady. But if she wasn't, would she be out on her ear?
I think if you dumped your lover for being overweight and you told him or her that, it would be very cruel. So I think, you know, just a few hints like hiding the chocolates or dumping the donuts behind the settee or something like that. Or you could tell them a little joke, a pointed joke. You could say, years ago, I had a girlfriend who was so fat, she hung her knickers on the line and a family of gypsies moved in. And that would sort of be a kind of hint to say, is he trying to tell me something?
Well, exactly. And listen, I tell you something, we don't mind a bit of old school humour, especially if it gets the message across. Adrian, what do you think about this? I mean, some blokes let themselves go. Maybe women are within their rights to dump them.
Yeah, look, I don't think any of us three are going to say you've got the right to dump your partner if they put on weight. But one of the tools, when I bring expedition teams together or corporate teams or even relationship teams, one of the tools I use is getting your agreements out, you know, putting your cards on the table. And this goes everything from your objectives for how you're going to deal with difficulty to your politics, your religion, whatever these things are. And the most important thing that I bring out is, do we have the agreement to say whatever we want to each other without the other person taking it personally? And that is one of the most fundamental things you can get. And it means that if you don't have that agreement, it means things fester. It keeps saying people take it back, they hold it in themselves. When you've got that agreement with someone, you can say anything. So you can say to your partner, look, sweetie, I think you're putting on a little bit of weight or something. Or to a teammate saying, I think you're being a little bit lackadaisical with some of your safety processes, whatever. But you're doing it for the objective. And I think the other thing is really, if you're aligned with your values, so with a couple, if you're aligned with the values of health and nutrition and all other things, if you're on that same page, you'll grow together. As Mel said, you'll grow together. You'll ups and downs, you'll have distances and things, but you've got that fundamental thing, which I think is the real core of everything, is, are we aligned with our values?
The other thing you could do is, Mark, you could just embrace the curves. You know,
exactly right.
Go for it. Go for a larger model.
Well, definitely. I've got to say, my wife has done so well because she started to put on some weight and then she took exercise. She changed her diet, and I put a padlock on the fridge, and it's been a game changer. Let me tell you. She's at home now, staring at the padlock, probably with a blowtorch. Mel, before you go, could you tell me about the show, because it's called Married at First Sight? So what's the kind of one-line elevator pitch of what this show actually is?
It's literally what it says on the tin. So we work behind the scenes to match people up, and they meet at the altar on their wedding day. They have a wedding, they have a honeymoon, and then there's, depending on which country you're in, I do it in Australia and in the UK, we have 8 or 10 other couples who all move into an apartment block together, and we bring them together weekly to have very fancy dinner parties with maybe a drink or two. They come and see us. There's 3 of us once a week for a commitment ceremony, and they decide whether or not they want to stay or leave. Challenges every week. It's a fast-tracked relationship.
Well, yeah, because, I mean, many people would think that's no basis for a marriage. You meet at the altar. But then again, if we think of arranged marriages in certain cultures and religions, many of those are very successful.
They are. That's right. And some of ours are too.
What are the pitfalls? Where can it go wrong?
Marrying at first sight. Yeah. Well, of course, it's a stranger. So as experts, we can do everything we can to predict compatibility. You know, as you were saying about values, about personality style, about aligning goals, about relationships and life. But at the end of the day, it's about chemistry, and that is something we cannot predict. So it very much becomes up to the couple and the spark between them.
Well, look, I've got to say it's making headlines. It's a fascinating format, and I'm definitely going to give it a go. It's called Married at First Sight, and the UK and the Australian version stars my lovely guest. So thank you so much for joining us, Mel Schilling. Let's get your views on this now. Earlier, before we went on air, we put it out on Twitter. The following question: is it wrong to dump your partner if they become overweight? Well, the results are in, and by the way, a big response, almost 4,000 votes in just an hour. 57.4% say it is wrong to dump your partner. 42.6% say it's okay. Wonder whether my wife is in that latter group. Lots more to come. We've got a very, very busy show. Up next, is university still worth the money? And in the next hour, are movies and TV shows about serial killers unethical? Plus, is it foolish to fight back against criminals? Or should you have more legal rights? If you do, defend yourself. We've also got the papers after 10. And in my take at 10, I'm pushing for a slimmed down Tesco value monarchy. Find out more about that at 10. But next up, we'll talk about university. What's the point?
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
For helping our great nation.
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland. On TV.
on radio,
And online.
we're proud to be
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flock at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show, Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. Over a drink, we have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Welcome back to Mark Dolan. Tonight, the emails are coming in thick and fast. Is it wrong to dump your partner if they put on weight? Strong views on this. This from Steve, who says, Dear Mark, I'm 68 and still have the same 32-inch waist as I had 40 years ago. I keep fit by cycling every day, up to 40 miles, and eating shed loads of salad, vegetables and other good food. I do eat some unhealthy items like milk chocolate and biscuits, but they are eaten in moderation. Sarah says, Mark, I do not agree with your opinion, and here's why. Fat people are not up for debate, especially by skinny people. There are so many reasons why people are fat, not just food. Take a look at the diet industry. They have a lot to answer for. Diets do not work, but they entice people in by making them feel less than they are. People hate themselves because of society's silly standards that they've set. It's a vicious circle. I think your show is inciting hatred in society. Your views are fatphobic, sexist and transphobic. Strong opinions like this are the reason the country is so full of hate. Well, look, I appreciate, Sarah, thank you for sharing your views. And it's a different view that you have, but one that you're very, very welcome to share on the national television airways. I'm glad you have. Keep those opinions coming thick and fast. The good, the bad and the indifferent. Moving on, though, university is a rite of passage for many young people, studying a chosen topic and learning life skills. But are they under threat? One story suggests universities could now be fined if their graduates fail to gain well-paid employment after graduating. So it begs the question, is university still worth the money? Well, I've got to start with the academic, haven't I?
Yes. I've got to be very careful here because I've
talk yourself out of a gig.
I know. Well, I've been in trouble for bringing a university I worked at into disrepute.
Okay.
By what did I say? That elite universities are toxic for all working class people, and I brought that university into disrepute apparently.
Oh well, the elite university,
yes.
or the one that?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
So,
and did you face censure for that? Did you get in trouble?
Yeah, I got a written warning for bringing the university into disrepute and for anti-middle class rhetoric.
Okay. What was the essence of that point? Do you mind going back into disrepute again?
No. What I was saying is that, and again, it really comes back to what we're talking about here. So if you go to university, universities are set up, the elite universities, for particular groups of people who have gone through particular schools and understand a certain way of education. And they've been almost trained in that way.
So you think the philosophy, the teaching approach of Eton works beautifully at Cambridge?
Of course it does, absolutely. I mean, I've been to the,
Like a continuation?
Yeah, I've done the Cambridge Union debates and the Oxford Union debates. They are absolutely the same, those chambers, as Westminster. They are training people to be politicians. That's what they do. And, the way that the networks are set up and the way that they contacts. So there are particular groups of people in the country that fit very well into elite universities.
But what about the working class kids that get into Cambridge?
But they're very few. They are very few. And when they get there, I mean, I've worked at some very elite universities. I worked at the London School of Economics. I worked at the University of Durham. I currently work in Luton at the University of Bedfordshire now, which is... it's an ex-poly, and all of my students are working-class students. And so this is why this story really has to be interrogated properly. Because if you're saying that you're going to fine universities if their students don't get graduate jobs, but they are... I mean, most of my students at Luton, at Bedford University, are working in Amazon part-time. They've got caring responsibilities. They're working-class people. For them to get...
And they're amassing debt.
Yeah, a massive £60,000 worth of debt.
Yeah.
And for them to then get a graduate job, I mean, what is a graduate job? But if you look at the other end of the scale, like Oxford or Cambridge, of course they're going to get graduate jobs because that's, the university fits with the business. The students that are in ex-polys, who have perhaps come from different backgrounds. When you go to university, you go with all the social capital, cultural capital, economic capital that your parents have given you. So if you come from a working class background, you go disadvantaged.
But if you do go to university and you don't get a job at the end of it, what was the point?
That is again. That's a different question.
When you might have spent 3 years training, apprenticeship,
and I think
seeing the world,
absolutely,
starting a business from your living room,
absolutely. But where we are now is in all schools, they sort of saying to kids, you must go to university. There is no other choice, and if you don't go to university, you're a failure. I mean, and that is a big message now to many young people, that you are an absolute failure. The stress that that universities and schools are putting on students is massive.
I think you're right. Adrian?
Do you think that's not changing, though? I think we've had this... But firstly, Mark, I left school at 16 with 5 measly GCSEs and spent 6 years university life.
And you've done all right. Look at you now.
Yeah, well...
Best-selling author, military hero, motivational speaker.
But the Sandhurst was like a university degree. But when I left the army early 30s, I went and did an MBA. So I'm very proud. I got no A-levels, no degree, but a master's degree. But what did that degree give me? I think it gave me that degree because some places you want to go to for countries to visit or certain jobs want that degree level education. But do I use it much? No. But what I say now, and to go with Lisa's point, times are changing. People, I think, now realise that university is not for everybody. It is, for some people, it is great. I would say people going to university, make sure it's a degree that's useful. Economics, history, politics, geography, business, all these things. Don't do the history of art or
why
Latin
not?
or
No,
Greek,
no, 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 no.
Greek history or something like this.
No.
Classics,
No, no,
ethnography, that's the worst. Oh,
No,
sorry, I'm so sorry.
excuse me.
Definitely joking.
No,
Real estate.
No,
Go on, Lisa.
no, because one of the things, if you look at employers, and I have looked at these reports, what employees want are critical thinkers. They can have people with lots of degrees, with lots of high marks, but what they do, they're not getting a critical thinker. They're not getting somebody that can sit there and start going, well, if we did that, what might happen? You know, that critical thought process. So philosophy and history of art, they are important subjects. But if we go down this road where everything is vocational and functional, then we lose our art and culture industries. And I think that's that's not a good thing to happen.
And developing that intellectual element to your
and also
set.
what we need to do is separate. I mean, this is happening. It's happening through the healthcare. Everything is becoming business. So we need to separate the degree from the education, because the two things are not the same. So you can have an education. You know, the degree is the bit of paper that you then trade at the end for a job. The education should be something completely different.
I haven't seen your academic CV, David, but you are a master of broadcasting, aren't you?
Well, I must tell you, I'm actually quite well qualified to answer this because I have a granddaughter at uni, and she's in her last year, and she's doing modern languages. So I rang her up earlier on, knowing that we're going to be talking about this, and she said she has another year to go, and then it's the majors, and of course that involves more money. She said because of COVID, she missed half a year. She had online learning that was poor quality. She said post-COVID, half of lecturers are online, and you still have to pay the full amount. And she says many lecturers are poorly paid, so where is all the money going?
You have to wonder, don't you?
Well,
That's the problem.
I do know.
I want to add something, to what Lisa said. She's absolutely right. Critical thinking, one of the key skills we need. If you look at surveys of the EIU survey, communication, teamwork, problem-solving, critical thinking. So fundamental skills. And yet, universities today are not allowing critical thinking. This is the great contrast, because critical thinking is frowned upon. So how we...
Not in my classroom.
Not in your class, I bet it isn't. But, I think it's one thing I say to universities, whatever degree you do, that concept, we're losing that skill in society, and we've got to bring it back.
Well, yes, I want to find out where the money goes in just a second. You said, I know where the money goes. I'd love the answer to that. But can we bring a political dimension to this, Adrian? Because it was Tony Blair in the late 90s and then into the 2000s who made it very much a principle of New Labour that they would get as many people, over 50% of school leavers, into university, just as an aspiration. And that looked on paper like to be a good thing. But in the end, students got themselves in debt. A lot of perhaps quite flaky courses, media studies, film studies, that kind of thing. And now we're having to sort of pay the price for that push for university. Why are we so obsessed with university in particular when there are other forms of education out there?
And that's my point. Not everyone is going to get the most out of university. Apprenticeships, vocational studies, work experience, various things.
But isn't it snobbery? It's like, proud parents. Oh, we haven't made it. My kids haven't made it if they haven't been to university. Why is that?
Well,
very
that's
British.
why I said,
it's uniquely. It's British.
This is why I said to Lisa, I think, yes, a few years ago, if you didn't go to university, it was perhaps slightly frowned upon. But I think now you realise, my daughter isn't. She won't go to university, but she's doing a great job. She's enjoying it hugely, and that's in hospitality, and that's what her line of work will be, but she doesn't need a degree in it.
Are there a lot of jobs that you're not going to get if you haven't been to university?
Well, that's a really good point. What do you think, Lisa?
I think the university system, I mean, like most of our systems, is completely broken. It really is. You know, the payoff between the cost of the degree and then what you get out of it. I remember 20 years ago, there was this figure always sort of bandied about that someone that had got a degree would earn over their lifetime £100,000 more than a person who hadn't. And now you can't say that because the degree itself and the loans that you take out is 50 grand.
Of course, the other thing you could say...
So you can't say that.
The other thing you could say as well is that it's years lost when you're not earning money. You know, you're getting to what, 25, something like that, and you haven't earned a bean, you know, and you've actually been spending a lot of it.
Did you go to university, David?
No, I didn't. I went to a grammar school, and when I left grammar school, I was called up and did my national service in the RAF, and that's how I got into broadcasting. So I've never actually done a real job.
Well, we wouldn't say that. You're the very best in the business. The emails are coming in thick and fast across all of these topics. It's been a really busy show tonight. Thank you so much for getting in touch, Mark at gbnews.uk. Derek says, Mark, a great show as usual. Would you send a child of yours to Glinda University in Wrexham that spells its name with a lowercase g? Accusation there from Derek that that particular university is dumbing down, even in terms of its branding. Trevor says, Mark, there are too many mediocre universities, such as former Polly's, running mediocre courses. I attended a Russell Group University. Well, Trevor, that's why the grammar and the spelling on your email was so damn good. I'll get to more of your emails very shortly, but up next in My Take at 10, should we have a lean, mean royal family, a modest monarchy? What do you think? That's My Take at 10 next. Lots to get through.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
For helping our great nation.
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland. On TV,
on radio
and online.
We're proud to be
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flock at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show, Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
It's 10 o'clock and this is Mark Dolan tonight. In My Take at 10, in just 1 minute's time, we should follow Denmark in having a slimmed down monarchy. I'm delighted to welcome King Charles to the throne, but it's time we got bang for our buck from this new generation of royals. Also, I'll be joined by the brilliant Kinsey Schofield to discuss Joe Biden. Another senior moment, I'm afraid, plus Hurricane Ian in Florida and Marilyn Monroe. Also, we're going to talk about, is it unethical to actually have movies and TV shows about serial killers when the families of the victims are still alive? Plus, tomorrow's papers at exactly 10:30. And it is the Sunday papers, and it's full of big political stories. So we've got a new thing on a Saturday night, uninterrupted, 10:30 to 11. Be there. My Take at 10 is coming up. King Charles, I hope you're watching. I'm not pulling my punches. First, the Queen of News, Tatiana Sanchez.
Thank you very much, Mark. I am Tatiana Sanchez. This is the latest from the GB Newsroom. Merseyside police have charged a 34-year-old man with the murder of Olivia Pratt-Corbell. Thomas Cashman is accused of killing the 9-year-old who was shot in her home in Liverpool last month. A second man, 40-year-old Paul Russell, has been charged with assisting an offender. Cashman has also been charged with the attempted murder of Olivia's mother and convicted burglar Joseph Nee, who was chased into the property. They'll appear at Liverpool Magistrates Court on Monday.
The investigation team, with support from officers and staff from across the UK, have worked relentlessly since the murder on the 22nd of August. It has been a complex inquiry which has been supported throughout by Olivia's mum and dad and the wider Merseyside community.
The Prime Minister has arrived in Birmingham ahead of the Conservative Party conference beginning tomorrow. There's mounting pressure on the government after the pound dropped to a record low following the Chancellor's £45 billion package of unfunded tax cuts last week. Earlier, Kwasi Kwarteng defended his mini-budget, saying the government had to do something different to spark the economy. The comments come after the Prime Minister admitted the government's strategy has caused disruption and warned the country faces a difficult winter. Thousands of activists have gathered across the UK in protest against the rising cost of living. It comes as an energy price cap rise comes into effect for millions of households. The new price cap is now in place, with a typical household expected to spend around £2,500 a year. That's up from £1,971. People are being advised to take a photograph of their meter readings amid record high energy prices. King Charles won't be attending next month's COP27 climate change summit in Egypt. The Sunday Times has reported Prime Minister Liz Truss had objected to him attending during an audience at Buckingham Palace last month. However, a Downing Street source says it's ridiculous to suggest those were the orders given. The monarch, a veteran campaigner on environmental issues, had been invited to attend the event. Police say they've not yet found human remains as their search for Moore's murder's victim, Keith Bennett, continues. The 12-year-old was one of 5 victims of Ian Brady and Myra Hindley, with 3 of them later found buried on Saddleworth Moor. They were discovered in the Peak District by an author researching the 12-year-old's murder. Brady and Hindley murdered 5 children in the mid-1960s, with 3 of the victims found. And Ukraine's President Zelensky says fighting continues in the east of the country. But earlier on, Russia said its troops abandoned the key town of Lyman to avoid being trapped. A video posted online by the Ukrainian president's chief of staff shows soldiers climbing onto a vehicle and waving the national flag on the outskirts of town. It comes as Russia has vetoed a United Nations resolution condemning Moscow's illegal annexation of 4 areas of Ukraine. TV, online and DAB+ radio. This is GB News. Now it's back to Mark Dolan tonight.
Welcome to Mark Dolan Tonight. Big stories, big guests and always big opinions. We'll be discussing crime in Britain and what it means for the average Joe. Astonishing scenes of somebody rugby tackling a criminal. So do people deserve better legal protection when they defend themselves? Plus the brilliant Kinsey Schofield discussing all things American, plus tomorrow's papers at exactly 10:30 sharp with full panel reaction, live and uninterrupted until 11. Lots to get through, but first, my take at 10. Denmark don't mess around, do they? There's been a right royal bloodbath at the famous Amalienborg Castle in the capital. I'm calling it the Cull of Copenhagen. The much-loved Queen of Denmark, who's now the longest-serving monarch in Europe following the sad death of Elizabeth II here, has stripped royal titles from 4 of her grandchildren in order to simplify the monarchy, bring down costs and allow them to lead more normal lives. Her youngest son, Prince Joachim, whose kids will lose out, is up in arms. Of course he is. He doesn't want the titles to go. Nothing is quite as tight as the grip of privilege. But the Queen of Denmark is doing the right thing. She wants key royals to be the focus of Denmark's monarchy and deliver value to loyal subjects. A bit of bang for your buck, some crown for your krona. This woman, like Elizabeth, has quite the Midas touch. At the time of her accession in 1972, only 45% of Danes were in favour of the monarchy, most believing it had no place in a modern democracy. During her reign, Queen Margrethe has modernised the institution, allowing her two sons to marry commoners, slashing the cost of the royal family's upkeep, and now by having a cull of the royal titles. Her modernising approach has worked. The Danish monarchy is one of the most popular in the world, enjoying the support of more than 80% of Danes. Well, as the British monarchy embarks on a glorious new era under King Charles III, I think it's time for a right royal shake-up here too. Obviously, keep the key royals, Charles and Camilla, the Prince and Princess of Wales, William and Kate, and the wonderful Princess Anne, who strikes me as the closest thing we've still got to our late, great Elizabeth. Stoical, sensible, good-humoured, hard-working and down-to-earth. God, I love Anne. Perhaps we could even find a job for Edward. Anything going at the Windsor branch of Lidl or Sports Direct? And as for Andrew, I'd suggest permanent accommodation in the Tower. He can do all the sweating he likes up there. And the less said about these two, the better. But I think all these grandchildren, the nieces, nephews and cousins that you've never heard of, they don't need the titles, the pomp and the privilege to which they've become accustomed. That should be the domain of our monarch and his immediate family. And I think it's perfectly sensible that William is not going to have an expensive investiture as Prince of Wales. He'll be brilliant in the new job, and I'm delighted he's got the title. He and Kate are models for what the future of the royal family will be. But it's a wise judgment call by Charles to tone things down as Brits struggle to pay their bills during a cost of living crisis. And we're hearing that Charles's coronation in around a year's time will be sensible and proportionate too. Get the horses out? Absolutely. The carriages, the silk, the gold, the ermine, I'm all for it. It will be a grand affair, but one which acknowledges the current economic circumstances and one which reflects a leaner, meaner monarchy. One which, like all public institutions, should count the pennies to save the pounds and deliver value to the taxpayer. A bit more Aldi, a bit less Harrods. A bit more Waitrose Essentials, a bit less Taste the Difference. A Tesco value monarchy is one we will all value for many years to come. Every little helps. I look forward to receiving my hamper from Tesco forthwith. Let's get the views of my brilliant panel, ethnographer and academic and journalist Lisa Mackenzie, adventurer, coach and social commentator Adrian Hayes, and broadcasting and radio legend in particular, David Hamilton. Folks, let me ask you what you think. Let me start with you, David. Is it time for a slimmed down, modest monarchy?
Well, I think, Mark, first of all, I think the events of the last few weeks have showed us that the majority of people in this country are very much in favour of the monarchy. It's been much criticised in recent years, but I think we witnessed the popularity of the Queen, and I think there's no doubt, I mean, all the queuing and that sort of business that went on. But I think also most people would be in favour of a slimmed-down monarchy. I agree with you, keep the hard-working ones, Princess Anne, who apparently is the most hard-working of all, Kate, who's never put a foot wrong in my book, and William, and Sophie and Edward as well. But take, for example, the Sussexes. I mean, what is that about? Two people who've rubbished the family that have made them both who they are today. If Harry's book has another pop at them, I think that's the last straw, and I think that they should have their titles taken away. So I think, yes, definitely slim down and won't cost us quite so much money.
Well, yes, I mean, isn't that the smart thing, David, about the royals through history and arguably the aristocracy is they've actually been mindful of the economic climate that they inhabit. It was the Queen, of course, who agreed in the 90s to pay income tax.
Sorry, what was that?
The Queen.
What?
She agreed to pay income tax.
They've
did she?
adapted
Yes,
at the time.
yeah.
Adapted.
Has she agreed to pay income tax?
She did in the 90s.
She did in the 90s.
Oh, she agreed to pay it, yes. Yeah, did she?
Yeah.
And do the others pay income tax?
Well, Charles pays income tax on his businesses, including the Duchy Originals food brand. So this is the point, isn't it, Adrian? Is that if this royal family is smart, they'll move with the times, they'll cut their cloth accordingly, and therefore keep the public's support.
Yeah, I'm unashamedly pro-royal, pro-monarchy. I loved our Queen more than anyone in the country and was deeply saddened by her death. But the reasons for keeping monarchy, I had a WhatsApp group of certain friends, two friends, one living in Turkey, one in the USA, who are anti-monarchist, anti-royal. I said, well, look at your heads of state, and then you can tell me if it's any better. So,
but you can vote them out.
I think it's. But what you said, I think the royal family has always adapted. It sometimes takes a little bit of time, but they have always adapted with the times. I'm very confident King Charles will do the same. Great confidence in him. And I think, as he said and you said in your monologue, that slimmed-down royal family is just what we need. And if there are any royals that don't want to be part of it, Duke of Sussex and Prince Andrew, for various reasons, then they're out of it. And so just keep a small core royal family, I think it will retain the public support.
Yeah, I don't think you can have the privileges without doing the work. That's what it's all about, isn't it? It's all about, you know, they're there to... If we're going to give them all that money, then we want them to work for us.
Lisa?
Let them eat cake, I suppose I'm going to say. Look, I'm a Republican. A slimmed-down royal family is the right direction, but as a Republican, I'd rather have no royal family as the head of state. And, you know, we can say, look at Biden, look at, you know, other heads of states, but you can vote those out. You know, we've got King Charles now for however long he lasts. And, you know, I know everyone, there's sort of this feeling after the Queen's funeral, and I wished no ill will on a personal family grieving at all. But I do think we are in a time where we do have to start to think about what a monarchy actually symbolises. What does it mean? And, you know, we touched a little bit earlier on the class system. And when we've got a monarchy that just by the accident of birth gets so much power and so much privilege, and I know people say, oh, they don't have power, but the Queen decided to pay income tax. So I'll decide today that I'm not going to pay income tax. You know, so they do have some power. So, you know, for me, it's going in the right direction, but I would be more than happy having them as just sort of symbols and also not paying for them.
Isn't that what people liked about the Queen, was the continuity, the fact that she was there throughout our lifetimes, whereas the Prime Ministers come and go. I think the continuity was what they liked.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you can vote them out.
Well, Lisa, once you bring in the inequality of privilege, where do you stop? You know, Bill Gates with all the elites, the globalist elites, where do you stop?
Yes, you do. Yeah, of course you look at that. You be critical about all of that.
But they haven't asked. They've got a duty. I think they bring in more than benefits to the country than possibly goes out.
They don't. You know.
Lisa, just think of every American tourist that flocks to Buckingham Palace just for a glimpse. Now it would be the King.
But Mark, which country or which city makes the most money from tourism? Which one is it?
Or which country enjoys?
It's Paris. Paris makes the most money from tourism, and look what they did to their monarchy. People go because they like the buildings and they like the history, and they would still come here. I'm not saying, you know, that they couldn't be royals. I'm saying that I don't want them as head of state, and I don't want to pay for them.
However,
don't you think that the pomp and ceremony that we had this year, don't you think that was a wonderful advert for this country? And people saw this, you know, this little country that has sort of told itself that it's no longer so important. To the rest of the world, once again, we looked absolutely fantastic, didn't we? We looked important again. We felt important again.
I mean, Adrian, you effectively fought for the Queen when she was with us. Why were you so attached to the monarchy? And what would you say to Lisa, who doesn't want to pay for it?
Well, we pride ourselves on GB News. We welcome all opinions, even from Republicans. So, and that's to be welcomed. But as I said, there is a great pride, there's a great respect, there's a great love for the monarchy. But as I said, I look at the alternatives and think, well, Europe didn't do very well abolishing the monarchies. We're the only country that hasn't had a dictatorship or civil wars or anything in most of Western Europe. So I think there's a good place. And the fact, I think, look around the world, and by the way, the royal family has got no qualms about countries in the Commonwealth becoming republics. But look how the Queen herself increased the Commonwealth from 7 nations to about 54 because people wanted to be part of this family. So there's a huge value in the monarchy, I believe, and it's.
I think you're both right. I think you're both right. I've got opposing opinions here on either side of me, Mark, but I think they're both right. But I think the answer is what you said earlier. Yes, but slim down.
OK, well, there you go. It's all about opinions. And as Adrian said, all opinions are welcome here. This programme is the home of free speech. Get your opinions over to me now at mark@gbnews.uk. What do you think about a slimmed-down monarchy? Do you think that the coronation in a year's time should be a modest affair? Let me know your thoughts. We've got some amazing talking points coming up in the show. Next up, are serial killer movies and TV shows unethical when the families of victims are still alive? Also, is it foolish to fight back against criminals? And should people that defend themselves have more legal protection? And are Brits abroad a national embarrassment? But next up, the Queen of US showbiz, political and royal reporting, Kinsey Schofield. And I'm afraid to say, another senior moment for Joe Biden. See you in 2.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
For helping our great nation
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
across England, Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland. On TV,
on radio,
And online.
we're proud to be the People's Channel, Britain's
news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flock at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. Over a drink, we have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Elizabeth not happy with my remarks about Prince Andrew. She said, you and your snide jokes about sweating Prince Andrew. He is, of course, a Falklands veteran, and that's why that condition is, of course, such an affliction for him. And you're so right, he is a war hero, but obviously the halo has slipped since then. But Elizabeth, thank you so much for putting me right on that one. You got me sweating now. Also, we've got Diane, who says, Mark, the UK would not be what it is without the royal family. God save the king. Diane, they're emailing from the beautiful city of York. How about George, who says, Mark, how is it that those demanding slimmed-down monarchies due to excessive costs are the same people who want absolutely massive government? Well, it's a fair point. And, of course, you would have to replace the king with a president, and they wouldn't be cheap either, would they? But we'll return to that conversation very shortly. It's time now for US News with the Queen of US Showbiz Political and Royal Reporting, Kinsey Schofield. Hi, Kinsey.
Hi, Mark. I understand the Prince Andrew comment, but I always love your jokes, so I'm torn on that a little disagreement there.
You're between a rock and a hard place. Well, let's talk about Joe Biden with that in mind. The leader of the free world. He's had a little bit of a senior moment, or we think it might be a senior moment. Let's take a look at this.
And so many of you know so much about this as well, and you're committed. And I want to thank all of you here for including bipartisan elected officials like Representative Governor, Senator Braun, Senator Booker, Representative Jackie. Are you here? Where's Jackie? I didn't think she was going to be here to help make this.
Where is she, Kinsey? Where's Jackie?
Mark, she's deceased, and she died on August 3rd. This is Congresswoman Jackie Walorski. She passed away in a car accident. This is horrible. Immediately after she passed away in the car accident, both Joe Biden and Jill Biden released a statement about what a wonderful woman she was and how they appreciated her contributions. Now, Joe Biden's press secretary was asked about this repeatedly after the incident, and she kept saying, oh, you have to understand Jackie was just on the top of his mind. And reporters said, but she is deceased, and he's acknowledged that she is deceased. How can you say she's just on the top of his mind? And she was like, well, I don't understand how you don't understand. I mean, it's just they're constantly trying to justify these gaffes that are, quite frankly, not only embarrassing to the country, but concerning when you think that this is the man that's in charge of the United States of America.
I'm afraid so. My producer, Carol, suggested we have a new item called Biden's Blunders, because here's another one. I mean, it's not quite a blunder, but it's a strange message to give to the American people during a hurricane. Take a look at this.
Let me be clear. If you're in a state where hurricanes often strike, like Florida or the Gulf Coast or into Texas, a vital part of preparing for hurricane season is to get vaccinated now. Everything is more complicated if you're not vaccinated in a hurricane.
But it's not a cult, is it? It's not a cult, Kinsey.
Well, I don't think that's like the first thing you should be worried about when a hurricane's about to hit. I think you should get your dogs and cats in the car. But no, the Biden's blunders, I think that's your go-to, Mark. That's really going to put you on the map. Do it yesterday. Somebody deserves a raise.
Yeah, I mean, if there's another crisis, let's imagine that inflation goes beyond 10%. That's probably a good time to get vaccinated. If there's an earthquake, get vaccinated. If the Golden Gate Bridge collapses, get a needle in your arm.
That's right. It's the only answer here in the United States of America. And if you don't, then you're a terrorist. So, there's no in between.
Yes. And unpatriotic. Listen, it's a tragedy what's happening in states like Florida. Tell us about this awful hurricane, Hurricane Ian.
Yeah, Hurricane Ian is probably one of the worst storms that the United States has ever seen. There are 30 deaths so far, and it's crippling the state of Florida. And Ron DeSantis, who you and I talk about a lot on this show, did an incredible job of getting everybody out of the state of Florida. There are really just a few people that stayed behind, but in the midst of all of this chaos, Kamala Harris actually telling people recently that she was going to focus on the communities of color when it came to resources for victims of Ian. This crippling, I mean, I'm not kidding you, like this is devastating to the people of Florida, because they hear that and they think, well, why am I not as important as my neighbor? The truth is, this was just a gaffe. She shouldn't have said this. This was a mistake, a classic Biden administration mistake, slip of the tongue, I suppose. But I read this story and I thought, this is why our country is so divided. And while it was a mistake to say communities of color and low-income communities were going to be the focus of how we help, how the country helps victims of Hurricane Ian, it's just, it creates this animosity between people, because it's not like this was misinterpreted. This came out of her mouth. She said it and people quoted her as saying it. And it's just like, this is why the United States is so divided, because of mistakes that are, that happen like this. this gets people talking, it gets people frustrated and upset.
And understandably so. That's a shocking remark to have made when people are in fear of their lives. I mean, do we know about the scale of threat to human life of these current storms, Kinsey? How bad are they?
I read that it was the 4th worst hurricane that the country has seen in quite some time. However, I mean, 30 lives. I'm very grateful that, you know, it's horrible. I'm sorry that we've lost 30, but 30 is a pretty low number.
Yes, indeed, mercifully, although, of course, there are 30 tragedies. But, you know, the economic impact will be massive, too. A big state like Florida, a big financial headache as well, businesses and the economy.
But Ron DeSantis is an incredible governor, and he's already prepared. He's been ahead of all of this, you know, telling people to leave so far ahead of when previous states, other states have done so. And he saved a lot of lives by getting in front of this hurricane. And he's actually begged people not to make this a political issue. I don't care if you're Democrat or Republican, get in your car and get out of Dodge. So I think he's a really good leader, and I do think that people are looking at him throughout this process, not to make it political, for 2024.
Unfortunately, I don't have a vote, but I think he would be an incredible president, given his leadership in the course of the pandemic and not caving to the science. Kinsey, let me ask you about a new series on Netflix called Monster, a Jeffrey Dahmer story. Who was Jeffrey Dahmer and what did he do?
Oh my goodness. Jeffrey Dahmer was a serial killer that we had in the 90s. In the 80s and the 90s, he killed 17 men, primarily African American and primarily gay. He's being played by Evan Peters in the new Netflix series. Now, this series has broke major records for Netflix as the most watched new series, beating out Squid Games. I tried to watch it. I had to turn it off within the first 15 minutes because it was just too gritty for me and too real. I don't like serial killers. I don't mind love triangles, true crime, but when it comes to serial killers and there being something psychologically wrong with somebody, that's when I'm not invested in it emotionally. But yeah, so this is a new series that's out on Netflix. A lot of people are upset about it, and specifically Jeffrey Dahmer's victims are upset about it, the families of the victims, because they think it's unfair that they would create this series without contacting them first and warning them. They talk about waking up and receiving a ton of text messages. Also, them recreating some of their most traumatic experiences inside the courtroom in the show.
Yes, it raises an ethical question about whether there should be TV dramas, movies about serial killers when the families of victims are still alive.
I completely agree. I did not think that this one was necessary. And then in casting Evan Peters, who I don't know if you're familiar with him, he's a very handsome and charismatic actor.
X-Men.
Ryan Murphy loves him. Yes, Ryan Murphy loves him. He's in all of the American Horror Story series, and he always plays this likable killer or this likable bad guy. And so there is a lot of debate about casting somebody so handsome and charming to play somebody that was just so disgusting and horrible.
Indeed, pretty troubling stuff, but the opposite to have you for the last 10 minutes, Kinsey, and I can't wait to see you in a week's time. Our heart goes out to everybody in Florida and the surrounding regions during Hurricane Ian, and we'll catch up in a week's time.
Thanks, Mark. Talk to you soon.
Great stuff. The amazing Kinsey Schofield there, the queen of US showbiz, royal and political reporting. Well, next up, uninterrupted. Between now and 11 o'clock, it is the papers. They're hot off the press. We've got Sunday's papers full of major political stories. And of course, it's the eve of Tory party conference. So what are Fleet Street saying about Liz Truss, Kwasi Kwarteng and our brand new government? That's the papers live in 2 minutes.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
for helping our great nation
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
across England, Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland. On TV,
on radio.
And online.
We're proud to be
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
On the Mark Stein Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Stein Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
As always on a Friday, Saturday and Sunday, it is the papers, and of course on a Saturday we have the Sunday papers and they are chock full of big political stories, but let's start with this one. Good. OK, brilliant stuff. Let's start with the Sunday Express if we can, and they're leading with the following. Olivia, man on murder charge. A man has been charged with the murder of Olivia Pratt-Korbel, the 9-year-old schoolgirl shot dead when a gunman burst into her home. Of course, that's now going to be an ongoing court case, but this is a breakthrough in a 6-week manhunt after this little girl was shot in her own home. A truly tragic story. Also in the Sunday Express, exclusive PM, I will do what it takes to get Britain moving. OK, The Observer next. Voters abandon Tories as faith in economic competence dives. 3/4 of UK voters, including a staggering 71% of those who backed the Tories at the last general election, believe the Prime Minister Liz Truss and the Chancellor Kwasi Kwarteng have lost control of the economy. This according to a poll for The Observer, of course, on the eve of Tory party conference. Humiliation also in The Observer for Putin. As key city is liberated by Ukrainians, Russia suffered a humiliating military defeat yesterday when Ukrainian troops liberated the key eastern city of Liman, with videos showing them raising a blue and yellow national flag and performing a victory dance. Sunday Telegraph now. Truss, only my plan for growth will reverse UK's slow decline. Change is something people might find worrying, but we do have to change. The status quo is not an option. Unleash nuclear weapons on Ukraine, Chechen ally tells Putin. And false data fueled Whitehall war on cars. The Independent, the Ukrainians who will never give up. And Tories tell Truss, U-turn now or face rebellion. Warning for the Prime Minister as livid MPs gather at conference. Liz Truss has a matter of days to row back on tax and welfare cuts or face a rebellion that could see her removed from Downing Street by Christmas. Senior backbenchers told The Independent MPs across the party are livid at suggestions she plans to renege on a promised benefit uprating to pay for tax cuts for the rich, with one describing Kwarteng's mini-budget as electoral suicide. Sunday Mirror. Brit escaped Russians to tell cellmates girls, your dad loved you so much. Tragic aid worker Paul Ure sent a message to his girls telling them, I love you so much. He died in Ukraine, where he and Brit pal Dylan Healy were tortured. Truly shocking story. And the Daily Star Sunday, comic heroes possessed me, says impressionist playing him on stage. Les Dawson's ghost ripped my trousers. Ace impressionist John Culshaw says Les Dawson blankety pranked him from beyond the grave. ripping a hole in his trousers as he portrayed the telly legend. Now, that's what I call breaking news. And those are your front pages. Let's get full panel reaction now with Dr. Lisa Mackenzie, Adrian Hayes and David Hamilton. And let's start with the Independent massive story there. A rebellion, U-turn now on tax cuts for the rich, or you'll be out by Christmas. Lisa?
I imagine that's what some of the backbenchers are saying. If you think about the 2019 election, and particularly those red wall seats, and I'm from Nottinghamshire, so we had that red wall sort of smashed in 2019. And I could imagine, well, I know that sort of tax cuts for the rich and then sort of draconian measures on the poor in the middle of a crisis where people are really frightened to put the heat on today, this is not going to play well with perhaps those working class people in the red walls that lent their vote to the Tories. I imagine there's a lot of upset backbenchers actually that are saying this.
Is it conceivable that the Tories would evict Truss by Christmas? Could things get that bad?
Well, I suppose I don't think
they're within their rights, aren't they?
Well, they are, but I think
if enough letters go in.
But I think their rules, or the Tories like
have to change
the rules. Yes,
they would have to change the rules in which a sitting prime minister. She's got a year. Before that vote of that vote of confidence in leadership could happen. However, they could change the rules.
They could change the rules, but I don't think they will, because what's the old saying that if you sack somebody in the after 3 months, it's their fault, but if you sack them in the first 3 months, it's your fault. So
that worries me because I've been here a year.
So the thing is, if they get rid of her now, that's bad on them, isn't it? That they've done this. I imagine that. What I think they'll do is sort of white knuckle it over this period and hope that that what she's saying may sort of settle down.
But the odd thing is, I mean, this is a budget for the poor, isn't it?
Well, no, I don't think it is. I don't think it is a budget for the poor, and I don't know what she keeps saying that we need change, but I'm not sure what she's trying to change.
Do you know where I get that controversial line, it's a budget for the poor, which is probably deliberately provocative, but the idea, and I don't want to go into bat for this government, but the idea of the tax cuts at the top rate, that was a Labour policy for 10 years.
Yeah, and it was wrong then.
OK, but the idea is that you attract wealthy people to come here, pay their taxes here, go shopping here, and invest here. And so it's purely a way of supercharging the economy, and that's national income. So you bring more cash into the economy, and that's when you've got the money to help people. Isn't that the thinking?
That's the thinking, but there's no evidence that shows that. There's no evidence.
But they're not doing it per se. It's not sort of for the rich, as in, they're just giving money to their mates. No, I'm not sure that that's a fair characterisation.
I'm not sure that they are doing that. I think they're not
that stupid, are they?
But they've got an ideology that they believe in. They believe in trickle down.
So you challenge the economic theory?
Of course, yes. I'm challenging the theory, not that they're attacking the poor.
Right.
I do think. I mean, if you think about sort of Osborne. Austerity measures. Was he fully aware of what was happening at the bottom? I'm not sure that they were. I'm not sure that they understood that there were people in this country that were starving to death.
But it's funny that I'm sure you're right, but that's interesting with austerity, because I think that this has affected and shaped the current policy.
Yeah.
They don't want austerity 2.0.
No, well, that's what Boris said.
Right.
Truss hasn't. I'm not sure. Truss,
we don't quite know yet if they're actually going to have.
Boris, I'm not. I don't support Labour. I don't support the Tories.
You're an anarchist.
I'm an anarchist, but I have to say that I had a little bit more faith in Boris's policies, which was about levelling up. Truss said last week that levelling up could start in the city, could start in the City of London with the finance industry. No, it can't. I live in a place where there's one bus an hour up until 5 o'clock, and then there's no buses.
But the city would pay for that levelling up, wouldn't it? That's the idea, and that was Gordon Brown's policy for a decade.
Yeah, it was, and it didn't work, because right through the night.
What about those billions that poured into the Treasury?
Well, if you go up to the red wall seats, which is, that they didn't benefit from that. And, one of the things that happened from 97 onwards was the working class Labour vote was diminishing. because of those sort of policies. So I'm not sure that, I am absolutely sure today that those red wall Tories are very upset.
Adrian, what's going to happen? Truss out by Christmas?
No.
Christmas turkey?
That's not going to happen.
Stuffed?
Look, this has been a very big debate of the last week.
You've pulled the cracker
obviously.
tonight.
So, yeah, I love it. But I'm going to put a little bit of a holistic view on it. I've got a mantra I live by, and I encourage this to all the teams I coach, that every view here, every person, every viewpoint has at least 10% correct. 10% correct. When you put that mantra in place, it means you actually listen to work out. You don't typecast, you don't label conspiracy theory, misinformation, far right, far left, fascist, all the rest of it. You actually listen. I would put the announcement, the mini budget, at about 50% correct. I think I like that it was a clear goal. It was bold. It was risky. It was against the malaise the last 10, 12 years. And I think that the plan for growth is what we need. What I don't like about it is the timing. I don't think it was right. I don't think that perhaps the balance between the tax cuts was right. But also, I've had this big thing against borrowing for many years. I've been screaming that why, the government needs money. And it doesn't have money. It only gets money from tax cuts or borrowing. And yet everyone across the country, individuals, couples, families, self-employed, small businesses, large businesses, corporations, we're all having to live within our means. There's one organisation that isn't. That's called our government. And what is such a shame, and now they're actually now talking about the spending cuts. Finally, they're realising they have to take spending cuts. But it's such a shame that spending cuts and living within our means often gets misconstrued as austerity. And everyone goes, austerity is such a bad word, whereas living within your means is actually a positive thing. I would say one
living
thing...
with austerity policies is not a positive thing, actually, no.
Austerity is a negative thing, but living within your means is a positive thing. I can tell you one thing that the government could do which could save 120, 140 billion. Cancel HS2 straight away. That won't affect anybody. And it'll give us a lot more money.
We'd have to take a bath on that, wouldn't we, of about, 30 or 40 billion completely down the drain?
Yeah, but we're going to spend 140 at least. It's going to carry on.
We could sell the land back that we've bought, couldn't we?
We could do that. Smart motorways. There's so much waste in what governments spend. I would really like a government to come a root and branch reform of everything. Show the public this is what we spend the money on. And then you'll be shocked about how much we waste on various things. So I think, and now finally, Kwasi Kwarteng has realised we've got to actually show the IMF and financial bodies that we've got to reduce spending to pay for these tax cuts.
Yes, although they're in a corner politically, as Lisa has demonstrated, with the cuts in the top rate of tax. Because if they then say to the public, we're going to also reduce departmental spending, it's going to look like, essentially, the public are paying for tax cuts with worse services. So politically, austerity, to a degree, may be necessary, but is now politically impossible.
That's where we've got to redefine the word of austerity. I agree with Lisa. It's a bad word if you start cutting benefits and welfare. But efficiency and vanity projects...
Lisa, you must think that these departments are just bloated, aren't they?
Look, I think that government wastes a lot of money. It wastes our money. As an anarchist, I'm not interested. I don't like that sort of centralised big beast. I don't like Westminster.
Unaccountable bureaucracy.
No, I hate that as an anarchist. That's my principle, is to get rid of that.
Yeah.
So I agree with you on that point. But because of the system that we're in, Westminster and the people that work in Westminster is very, very far away from the people at the bottom. And just sort of, you said, people living to their means. I interviewed, because I'm a researcher, I interviewed a mother in 2016 it was, so it was sort of just after the austerity policies were in. She'd had a benefits cut. She'd got 2 children living in East London. And I was talking to her weekly, talking about poverty and housing. And she said to me, I'm really proud of myself because I'm living within my means. And I was like, OK, what are you doing? She says, I'm skipping meals. So, I don't eat for a whole day and then my children can eat well. That was her interpretation of living within her means. She was really proud of herself. I sat there that day. I went home and I wept.
Yeah.
That there was a mother not eating every other day and she thought that that was something for her to be proud of.
When there are people driving around in Ferraris.
Yeah, and on the streets of London at particular times of the year, gold Ferraris.
Yeah. Yeah. David, what do you think about this? Do we live beyond our means? Do we need to have a grown-up conversation about government spending?
I'm not an expert on politics. I know that will surprise you. But it just occurred to me, that Boris must be laughing, mustn't he?
Yeah.
And, be very careful what you wish for. That's all I would say. Is, if her own party don't have faith in her at this particular point now, I think they have to stay with it. They have to, whether they think it's right or not, you've got to stay with it. But it does begin to look like the biggest cock-up since Gallipoli, doesn't it?
Yes, although, could she go from zero to hero if this budget produces the dividend of economic growth?
Yes.
If the economy's growing in 2 years' time and the Eurozone's in recession, perhaps she wins the next election.
The problem is that so many people are knocking it before it's even got off the ground. We understand, the Labour Party conference, obviously, but once your own party is losing faith in you so early in the game, it's very worrying. And both of them are so untried, aren't they?
Well, they are.
Her Chancellor are new kids on the block.
You've been in showbiz for decades. And what we need to see, or perhaps what the Tory party need to see from Liz Truss this week in her keynote speech, is the performance of her life.
Yeah.
Do you think she can get that speech right? Can she turn this around with a speech?
I don't know. I mean, obviously she's got to try not to be Margaret Thatcher too. That's the first thing, isn't it? She's got to be Liz Truss. But can I just say this, and it doesn't matter which party it is, I think party political conferences are the most boring events. I get so terminally bored with them. I find them just they're just boring, aren't they?
They're very introspective, aren't they?
Yeah,
they
they
talk
are
to themselves.
banging the drum for themselves, and God, let's have a bit of light entertainment.
MC them all, then you're
they need David Hamilton there.
They had Kenny Everett. Do you remember the year when the Tories had Kenny Everett come on?
Yes.
Did you remember that?
Was it
exactly
Kenny Everett?
Right. Yeah.
And he said bomb the Russians, didn't he?
Yes, he did.
Bomb the Russians. But one thing about Boris, he did give us a bit of showbiz, didn't he? He had a bit of, in his sort of bumbling kind of way.
Well, too right, absolutely. An interesting story, I think, in the Telegraph. Let me get this one for you, because the headline is quite striking. False data fuelled Whitehall war on cars. A flurry of low-traffic neighbourhoods which limit driving in residential streets were introduced in 2020 with £225 million in emergency funding allocated by government for councils to encourage walking and cycling. These have proved controversial, with residents and businesses in some areas pushing for the schemes to be removed because of concerns about their impact on emergency service response times and traffic levels on surrounding main roads. You just wonder, don't you, David, whether the war on cars must stop?
Oh, it's awful, isn't it? I mean, motorists are just being pilloried by everybody. I must tell you a funny story about this. My wife, Mrs. Hamilton, or Lady Hamilton, she would like to be, you often referred to, is a very slow and very careful driver. And recently, she got something through from the Met Police. She was doing 35 miles an hour in a 30-mile-an-hour limit. And they told her that she was up for 3 to 6 points on her licence and a fine of a maximum of £1,000 to £5,000. Now, this is a police force that don't seem to be able to get people who are burgling houses, and yet, my wife is... Well, she's in her 70s, and, she finds a lot of this absolutely frightening. Now, she can go on one of these courses, and they sent her a letter saying you can go on the speed awareness course, and she needed time. She wanted somebody with a computer to help her to get into it, because, we seniors are not that up to...
You are.
I know you find that hard to believe. Anyway, within 3 weeks, she had another letter from the Met Police saying that unless you enrol on this immediately, we will take away the offer of the awareness course. So, in other words, you'll face this fine. I mean, how could anybody be talking about £1,000 to £5,000 for 5 miles an hour over a speed limit?
And I happen to think, look, on a very small residential street or in front of a school, 20 is acceptable. But now, 20 across our cities, I think is too slow.
It's very difficult to drive at 20 miles an hour. It's
well, I
extremely-
go around on my moped, and if I do 20, which I do because it's the law, I get overtaken by cars because it's a hazard, or I get
Cyclists.
I get tailgated. And cyclists.
Yeah,
even.
cyclists, yeah.
They're
Mark,
even quicker.
cyclists.
This story, by the way, I need the Hubble telescope to read this, but
Yeah.
anyway. But the point, it's just a tiny, tiny example. One of the biggest problems we have in society and government these days is not looking at impact analysis. There is this great thing, just do something. And they do something.
Pandemic, anyone?
Pandemic, net zero, benefits, tax rises. Nobody is looking at the consequences. And this is just a small example.
I know a little bit about this, actually, the LTNs, because the women I interviewed around housing in East London were then subject to these things, these LTNs.
Low traffic neighbourhoods.
Yeah, and what they were... the mothers that I knew realised that the traffic had been sort of moved and they were going past their children's schools because it moves... These LTNs, they actually move traffic in other directions. And they noticed that the traffic was then going past children's schools and in their neighbourhoods and away from the sort of more gentrified neighbourhoods in East London. So
this is a scandal, and this is the hint of this story in the Telegraph. They're saying that some of these findings found that the Department for Transport had overcounted the rise in traffic on residential streets. In other words, false data to achieve their political ends.
That doesn't surprise me at all.
We've heard false data before.
Yeah. Back to the pandemic. There you go. Don't get me started. Look, another couple of stories from the papers before we go. Footage shared on social media shows the moment a brave, unidentified woman tried stopping a mobile phone thief near Borough Market in London. Take a look at this. Yeah, by the way, that'd be quite a butch woman.
Yeah.
It's a man. But it's a shocking state of affairs that this sort of crime is so normal and typical in our big cities. But there you go. So they've apprehended. A lady has come along to help as well. But, well, what do you think about this? Let's talk about whether it's foolish to fight back against criminals. What do you think, Adrian?
Nope. I would do it myself.
Is it not dangerous, though? Because they're professionals, aren't they?
The thing you've got to watch out for most of all, sadly, unfortunately, unacceptably, is knives. But if you can get some chair... In fact, I saw it a few weeks ago, one brave bystander threw a bike on this guy causing carnage in London. And I thought, great, just find any object just to protect yourself. But yes, there's plenty of objects around on the streets that you can use to disable a...
So you would say if you fancy your chances and you don't see a knife, go for it.
If you don't see a knife, go for it, but use whatever motorbike, bicycle, chair, bollard, whatever it is to protect yourself.
We've seen terror attacks thwarted by brave members of the public, haven't we? Yeah. So what about this story, and it's quite an amazing story that happened to a friend of mine. He's in his 70s, and he was in the SAS. But of course, he's an older man now. He's quite short, he's bald, and I suppose walking down the street, he might look like a soft touch for criminals.
Yeah.
As he's walking along the street and he's got his phone in his hand, suddenly a motorbike mounts the pavement next to him. There's two thieves on the bike, and they go up to him, they produce a knife, and they want to get the phone. He then seizes the hand that's holding the knife, twists the hand to move the knife away from him, in the process breaks the wrist of the young criminal. This criminal then falls off the motorbike, the other one runs away, and he holds this criminal in a brace position until the cops arrive. What was the first thing the police did? Arrested my friend.
Yeah.
Yeah. Why? Because he has injured or even broken the wrist of this kid. Except that the kid was holding a knife and threatening his life. It went to court. This guy, a year of his life ruined. The court case, the judge threw it out. But welcome to modern Britain.
But that's...
No justice.
No, but that's what you've got to think about before you sort of jump into these situations. Yeah. What is the consequence for me?
I think you've got to be very careful because, if they're after your mobile phone, let them have it because,
But the problem is, where do you draw the line, David?
Well, as you mentioned earlier, a lot of people now are carrying knives. And once you get into a situation like that, you don't know what you've started. Years ago, I might have been like you. I might have had a pop at them. But I think now I would just say, well, let them have it,
Let them have it, yeah, I suppose so. Well, look, there you go. Whatever happens, do stay safe, folks, because our cities, I think, are getting more dangerous. Can I thank my brilliant panel tonight of Adrian, David and Lisa.
Do all come back and see us very soon. It's been a brilliant conversation. This show's nothing without you. Thank you for the emails. Thank you for your company. And of course, I'm back tomorrow with a very special show. It is our Tory Party Conference special.
Whoa.
2 hours of Trustonomics.
Whoa.
You won't want to miss it.
Oh,
we've got some of the biggest voices in the world of politics from across the political spectrum. Can Liz Truss survive this current storm? So that's Mark Dolan tonight. Tory Party special at 9. Be there or be square. Next up, it's Headliners. See you shortly.
Looking ahead to tomorrow's weather, and the UK is looking dry for many though, with showers for western Scotland and rain across southern England and Wales. Let's take a look at the details. A mostly dry and fine morning for Scotland, with just the odd scattered shower mainly in the west. The best of any sunny spells will be in the east, remaining breezy. Widely dry across Northern Ireland on Sunday with sunny spells, though there may be the odd light shower for northern coastal regions. Across northern England it will be mostly dry with sunny spells. In the west there may be an isolated light shower, with the best of the sunshine in the east. For North Wales it will be widely dry morning with bright or sunny spells. A different picture for South Wales, where it will be cloudy with outbreaks of rain that could be heavy. Across the Midlands, a dry end to the weekend. There will be sunny spells, but these might be hazy at times, with cloud building in from the south. Feeling pleasant in any sunny spells. A dry morning across East Anglia with sunny spells for many. The best of the sunshine will be across Norfolk and Cambridgeshire, with slightly cloudier skies in the south. A cloudy and wet morning for much of southern England, with outbreaks of rain that could be heavy at times. Strong winds will affect the far west of Cornwall for a time. Rain will continue across the south throughout the morning, with isolated showers in the far northwest, remaining dry elsewhere. And that is how the weather is shaping up during tomorrow morning.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
to each and every one of you
for helping our great nation
find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland. On TV,
on radio
and online.
We're proud to be
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters, with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flock at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Good evening, I'm Tatiana Sanchez. This is the latest from the GB newsroom. The Prime Minister says she wants to get Britain moving ahead of the Tory party conference in Birmingham tomorrow. It's expected Liz Truss will say high tax is unsustainable and more growth is needed to create better jobs, boost wages and fund services like the NHS. But a new poll from Opinion has found Ms Truss's approval rating has fallen